With joint practices coming along, what should the New York Jets fans be doing? And more importantly, who should we be scouting over the next few days? What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo, and today we're going to be going over a couple of players that the New York Jets should be keeping their eye out for during joint practices, and a couple of players that maybe the New York Jets should try to hide in case another team wants to try and steal them. As we know, every team in the NFL goes through joint practices, and unfortunately, the New York Jets did not have the benefit or the luck of drawing a lot of really good competition in terms of the teams that we're going to be doing joint practices with. That doesn't change the fact that every team in the NFL has to cut their roster down from 90 men down to 53, which means that there is going to be a ton of talent out and available for the New York Jets to scour and scout, and this gives the front office a great opportunity to get up close and personal with some of the players that might not make the Carolina Panthers roster that can contribute to the New York Jets roster. We saw it last year with the New York Jets being the #1 most poached team in the offseason in terms of players that we cut that didn't make our 53-man roster that ended up playing significant snaps and NFL reps for other teams. A great example of this was last year when, a surprise to everybody, and we released Jason Pinnock, and then he got claimed by the New York Giants and is playing for the Giants right now. The New York Jets have an opportunity to scout some players and also have an opportunity to highlight some players that we might not make the roster so that they get NFL jobs elsewhere. So let's talk about the players that are going to be on the roster bubble for the New York Jets that have an opportunity of being poached that might not make the 53-man roster for the New York Jets. We're always going to talk about cornerback Bryce Hall, Javelin Guidry, and Jimmy Moreland because they're having exceptional camps, and depending on how the New York Jets decide to go about having the cornerback room set up, one of these three guys might not make the cut and might be exposed. One of the players that I'm really scared that the New York Jets might not carry and exposed to waivers that will definitely get claimed is safety Trey Dean, who is having himself a phenomenal camp. And if they decide to keep Ashton Davis over Trey Dean, I think that that's a mistake. Linebacker Chaz Surratt got hurt and had an excellent Hall of Fame game and excellent practice, but how does that affect his possibility of making the New York Jets roster? Can possibly be poached. And then, of course, wide receiver Jason Brownlee, tight ends Kenny Yeboah and Zach Kuntz, all having solid camps, all coming in as undrafted free agent or late round draft picks in really crowded rooms that could be exposed and more than likely won't clear waivers. And I would not be surprised if any of these guys were picked up by the Carolina Panthers. They desperately need help in the tight end room and in the wide receiver room, and any of the guys that I mentioned would be great additions for them. But more importantly, who can the New York Jets look at? Who can the New York Jets target that might not make the Carolina Panthers roster? Well, after breaking down the New York Jets roster and seeing who would the New York Jets possibly target, I kind of took a little bit of this information from the Zach Rosenblatt tweet. For those of you who don't know, he's the writer for The Athletic. I'll put the link to the tweet in the description below if you want to read his tweet. But we kind of came to a similar conclusion, and he saved me a ton of time in terms of researching the Carolina Panthers roster, which is the New York Jets are probably going to be targeting the offensive line and the linebacker room if it came to addressing some free agent needs. Now, he also has safety in there as a possible room that they might address. I don't think that's 100% true. I think that the New York Jets are more than comfortable with the 5 or 6 guys that are currently competing in the safety room and would feel comfortable with any 4 of those 6 guys making the roster, but you never know. So some of the names that he brought up and some of the names that I agree that the New York Jets should be looking at is defensive tackles Marquand McCall and Bravion Roy. The New York Jets need to acquire depth in the interior of the defensive line. While we have 3 absolutely good players, one of them being a stud in Quinnen Williams, Al Jefferson, and Quinton Williams, Quentin Jefferson, sorry, it makes a fantastic opportunity to fill out and pad out the rest of the roster. Solomon Thomas is a guy that I've said before, and I'll continue saying, I don't think is good enough to make the New York Jets roster as an interior defensive lineman, and I would like to find more depth somewhere else, and these two guys might not make the roster and could provide the New York Jets with that depth that they desperately need and the interior of the defensive line room. Now, another room that the New York Jets might be looking to bring in competition is the linebacker room. We saw that with the cuts of Hamza Nasruddin and bringing in the two gentlemen that were in free agency, but also with the injury to Chaz Surratt. We don't know how serious that is going to be and how that affects it. And the Carolina Panthers have a lot of really interesting linebackers that would fit our scheme really, really well. Zach highlighted linebackers Chandler Wooten and linebacker Kamu Grazier-Hill. Now, Kamu Grazier-Hill is actually a very interesting prospect in terms of a guy that we can bring to the Jets. He's not really all that young, but he's a very rangy, good coverage linebacker who struggles in like areas of the run game that is expected with that kind of a linebacker, the type of play that he has. He has problems shedding blocks and things like that, but kind of fits the mold of what the New York Jets want in a linebacker. They want a linebacker who can cover, who is kind of a cornerback first and a linebacker second, and Grazier-Hill fits that role and fits that mold perfectly. Now, he did mention two offensive linemen, both of them being guards, mentioning Michael Jordan and Justin McCray. Now, the interesting thing here would be if the New York Jets decided to play Elijah Vera Tucker at tackle, they would want to bring in an offensive lineman to replace that kind of role and fill in the gaps that might be left. And it doesn't seem like Tristan Colon, a player that I was really high on when we brought him in to be a competition for the guard center spot before we signed Connor McGovern and obviously before we drafted Joe Tippmann. I was really high on Cologne, but it seems like this offensive coaching staff and this offensive line coach and Nathaniel Hackett and Keith Carter aren't as high on Tristan Colon as maybe some of the fans are before the process started. So again, a couple of interesting names to keep an eye out. Remember, this is just as good of an opportunity for the New York Jets to scout other players as it is for other teams to scout our players. So we got to keep an eye on who is balling out during these joint practices, because if they don't make the 53-man roster, they might be going somewhere else, and that's not always the best case scenario for the New York Jets. Let me know what you guys think about the players that the New York Jets should be looking at during these joint practices. And last but not least, go Jets.